G'day, in 2024 Max Verstappen scored his fourth World Drivers' Championship. McLaren won their first Constructors' Championship since 1998. We saw 7 different drivers win races, and I was there to capture it all for you. This is my 2024 season wrap. Let's kick the year off in Bahrain, where it started in spectacular fashion with Christian Horner's allegations being dismissed and then all of the media being sent the text messages that he allegedly sent. It was a story that would run for weeks. But by Sunday, the first race had been run and won with Max Verstappen on the podium from Perez and Carlos Sainz. Round 2, Saudi Arabia, Dr. Helmut Marko accused of leaking all of that Christian Horner material. He could be sacked, they said. He wasn't. He's still with us. Carlos Sainz was struck down with appendicitis, and that opened the door for Ollie Bearman for his first F1 drive. Max Verstappen took the podium from Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc, and at that point we figured, right, it's going to be another massive year of domination by Max. Round 3, my home race in Australia, and it was the first time we saw Max suffer a technical issue in a heck of a long time, and I remember vividly the crowd cheering when it happened. Williams had dramas, Alex Albon crashed, his car couldn't be fixed, so they asked Logan Sargent to give up his car for Alex to race on Sunday. Carlos, in his comeback race from appendicitis, ended up winning the race from his teammate Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris in third. Next up, we're off to Japan, and it was cherry blossom time because we were racing at a different time than we normally do. Carlos was praying to the gate staff to let him in because he forgot his pass, and on lap 1 of the race, Daniel Ricciardo collided with Alex Albon at turn 2, wiping both of them out. Verstappen, Perez, Sainz was the podium. Round 5 saw us head to China. Carlos Sainz had a spin in qualifying. It was Zhou Guanyu's first home race, and the crowd absolutely went berserk for him after the race out on track. Lewis Hamilton took out a spot in the top 3 in the sprint race. Become feature race, Max Verstappen once again on the podium from Lando Norris and Sergio Perez. In 2024 there were 24 races, and that's a lot of travel for Formula One drivers, many flying private. In fact, I flew private with Insijets earlier in the year, and I'm pleased to tell you that they now offer an Insijets card. Trust me, this is an absolute game changer. Not only does it guarantee you access for the perfect aircraft for your next trip, it also offers flying hours at a fixed rate. If you've always wanted to be an aircraft owner, but you could do without the long-term commitment, then you'll want to check this out. You simply book for a minimum of 10 hours, give as little as 24 hours notice, and you're good to go. No membership fee, no expiry date, no exit penalty should you change your mind. Not that you would. Now you can find out more about an Insijets card by clicking in the link in the description below, or check the pinned comment. The first of the 3 US races took place in Miami, and it was a big weekend. Donald Trump was in attendance, and there was security galore there. Daniel Ricciardo excelled in the sprint race, finishing 4th. Lando Norris crashed in the sprint at turn 1. Logan Sargent crashed in the main race on Sunday, and there was much talk that that could lead to him being fired by Williams. But come Sunday, the story was all about Lando Norris taking out his first Formula One win. Second was Max, with Charles third. He'd threatened many times before, but this was a magical day for the British driver, one that I'll remember for a very long time. We headed to Imola for round 7. It's a beautiful track. Leo the dog certainly liked it. It was the first time I saw him at a race with Charles Leclerc. And once again, Max Verstappen was on the top step with Norris second and Leclerc third. Round 8 saw one of the biggest crashes of the year, with Sergio Perez ending up in the Armco as he headed up the hill on lap 1. It wasn't the only crash of the weekend, because earlier, one of the water taxis in Monaco ended up on the dock. The skipper in charge accidentally accelerated, fell off the back of the boat, didn't have his lanyard connected to the auto switch, and the boat just turned left and was lucky not to hit a human, but it certainly did some damage to a couple of boats before ending up stranded on the dock with the engine still going. Interestingly, I spoke to one of the patrons on board one of the boats that witnessed this, and it turns out that was Logan Sargent's dad. But late afternoon on Sunday, it was Charles Leclerc standing on the top step of the podium for his first ever home race victory. What a thrill that was for him. We're not halfway through the year yet, but we're heading to Montreal, and good news, in 2026 we won't be doing that as a standalone race, because that is a tough grind. My memories from the Montreal race, well, police not allowing ticket holders to go to the track, thinking that the bad weather had cancelled the afternoon sessions. That resulted in thousands of angry fans, and then come race day, barricades were put up over the wire fence in front of people who'd been sitting there for hours. What happened during the race? George Russell took his first pole position of the year, and come race day, Logan Sargent crashed, resulting in him having to sit by the track in a deck chair before walking back through the bush to get to his garage. On the podium, Verstappen again, from Norris and Russell. Round 10 was significant, not for what was going on the track, but for what happened off the track, in the paddock to be precise, with McLaren's motorhome going up in smoke. Other teams came to McLaren's aid, hosting their VIPs, while the drivers ended up using the spare rooms in the engineering motorhome instead of the hospitality suite. On the podium, it was Verstappen from Norris, Hamilton. Round 11 saw us head to the beautiful Styrian Alps in Austria, where the sprint race was delayed by a lap when race control decided that photographers, who had normally stood in a certain spot at the top of turn 1, had to all be moved. Daniel Ricciardo was brandishing a knife about in the tunnel under the track. I defended Logan Sargent after David Coulthard had incorrectly said that Logan Sargent had nudged up to this pole, when in fact it was his teammate Alex Albon. Come race day, everybody was talking about the Lando Max incident, which effectively handed George Russell his second win for the year. Rounding out the podium, Oscar Piastri and Carlos Sainz. Round 12 saw some very soggy weather in Silverstone. This was the site for plenty of action on track with the Brad Pitt F1 movie. He brought a huge team with him for the movie, which will be released in June 2025. It was a real celebrity fest, but the big story was Lewis Hamilton's first win in 2.5 years in front of a jubilant home crowd. He beat home Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. And the final race of the first half of the year saw us in Hungary, where it was hot. It's always hot. It was Oscar Piastri's first win. It wasn't an ideal win for Oscar, given that Lando Norris had to be talked into giving the place back to Oscar, which he gave up earlier in the race. But still, a win is a win. Lewis Hamilton was third. Next up, it was the Belgian Grand Prix, where George Russell won the race and then lost it. Why? He was disqualified for being underweight in his car. And earlier in the weekend, I witnessed something I don't see very often, with Lewis Hamilton denying someone an autograph because of the picture. "I can't sign that," he said. But that didn't stop the British driver winning the race. It was his second for the year and would be his final win for 2024. Ahead of Oscar Piastri was Charles Leclerc, third. Round 15 saw us head to the Netherlands, and unfortunately it was a shocker weekend for Williams. Alex Albon disqualified from qualifying for a floor height infringement, while Logan Sargent crashed in the final practice session and didn't get a chance to qualify at all. The star of the weekend, though, Lando Norris, chalking up his second win for the year in front of Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. But after the race, something quite bizarre. Haas's assets were unable to leave the Netherlands because they hadn't got confirmation that they had made a payment to a former sponsor. It was eventually sorted out and the gear was allowed to leave the Netherlands for the next race, which was in Monza. And that weekend we saw two notable crashes. The first, not by an F1 car, but by the safety car, which ran off the track at Parabolica after driver Bert Mailander ran out of brakes. They just simply gave up. The second crash involved Kimi Antonelli, once again at the same spot that the safety car came off at, this during the first minutes of his FP1 practice session. That didn't stop the announcement coming shortly thereafter that he would indeed replace Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes for season 2025. This was also the race that Logan Sargent was swapped for Franco Colapinto. And who won the race? Well, it was a dream result for Charles Leclerc, with a home win for his Ferrari fans, followed by Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. In Azerbaijan, we had Oliver Bearman, who'd already raced earlier in the year for Ferrari, stepping into Kevin Magnussen's car after he received a one-race ban. Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz crashed. Franco Colapinto scored his first points in Formula One, and McLaren took the lead in the Constructors' Championship after Oscar Piastri won the race from Charles Leclerc and George Russell. Next up, it was off to steamy Singapore for round 18. This was the race where Max Verstappen was handed out a penalty for swearing. Not in the car, in the press conference. Lando Norris chalked up his third win for the year in front of Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri, but for me it was the bizarre events surrounding Daniel Ricciardo's departure that took my full attention. We waited around for hours after the end of the race, knowing full well that Daniel was leaving the team, but nobody at the team would confirm it. Daniel couldn't confirm it, and in the end he left the paddock on his own to no fanfare at 2 a.m, not to return to Formula One as a driver. unless something completely out there happens. Round 19 was back in Austin, Texas, and Liam Lawson's first race for VCARB, replacing Daniel Ricciardo after the Singapore events. But Daniel Ricciardo was still being promoted at the track. It was a rather eerie sight. Lando Norris rolled up in, without a doubt, the most unique road car of the year. And on the podium we saw the first Ferrari 1-2 for the year, with Charles Leclerc in front of Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen third. Round 20 saw us in Mexico City at altitude. Liam Lawson had a run-in with Sergio Perez. You'll remember the middle finger. He would later apologise for that. Brad Pitt had his crew in the stadium post-race, filming scenes for the movie. Yuki Tsunoda got airborne, crashing at turn 1. But the win went to Carlos Sainz, with Lando Norris second and Charles Leclerc in third place. But I'll remember this race for the post-race antics down in pit lane, with both teams doing celebration shots in pit lane. Zak Brown was the first to photobomb Ferrari's photo shoot, and then Carlos Sainz photobombed McLaren's shortly thereafter. Brazil for round 21 was a crazy weekend for so many different things. The weather played havoc, forcing qualifying to be run on Sunday morning before the race, and at 7:30 a.m. That's the earliest I've ever heard. There were 5 crashes in qualifying, and it ran some 90 minutes. On the formation lap, Lance Stroll spun right in front of me and then decided to drive through the gravel trap, resulting in him getting bogged and not being able to start the race. Oliver Bearman got his third F1 race of the year, filling in for an unwell Kevin Magnussen. This would end up being a bittersweet moment for Oliver, because of the fact that he then lost his rookie status, having competed in 3 F1 races in a season. Max Verstappen won the race, but the surprise podium finishes for second and third, the Alpine drivers. Esteban second, Pierre third. That was important for Alpine because they jumped from 9th position in Constructors to 6th. And that's about a $30 million difference in prize money come the end of the season. Round 22, Las Vegas, and a crash in the race for Franco Colapinto. He also crashed the race prior in Brazil, but this race was notable for Max Verstappen not finishing on the podium and yet still winning the Drivers' Championship. And we would stay at the track until the very early hours, waiting for Max to celebrate that with his team, which he did on the energy station. The penultimate round of the year saw us in Qatar on unusually cold nights. And again, Franco Colapinto crashes, although not of his own doing. Esteban Ocon and Nico Hülkenberg featured in that one. All drivers were okay, but this race was to be dominated news-wise by penalties. Max Verstappen handed a one-place penalty for an incident in qualifying. Lando Norris handed a 10-second stop-and-go penalty, which would see him go from 1st to 10th position, on a weekend where, if Lando and Oscar had finished 1 and 2, they would have tied up the Constructors' Championship for McLaren. That wasn't to be. Max Verstappen took the win from Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri third. The final round in Abu Dhabi saw Jack Doohan replace Esteban Ocon at Alpine. Max and George trade verbal attacks after the events in Qatar, and McLaren hold off a determined Ferrari team to seal the Constructors' Championship, their first since 1998. It was Lando Norris from Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc third. Well, 2024 has been a remarkable year for Formula One. So many different winners, so many exciting happenings on and off track. 2 of these drivers were fired mid-season. 1 wasn't invited to drive the last race. 1 drove 3 races and wasn't featured in either the pre- or post-season group pick. On top of that, 4, maybe 5 of these drivers won't be back in 2025, and 4 are changing teams. For those of you not subscribed, here's your chance to do so, and please like this video. And for a whole lot of extra content and merchandise, this is where you need to look. Thanks for watching.
And stay passionate.
No, that's no good.